Grandma and her family was fading. Leukemia. The doctor's words echoed in the sterile hospital hallway. A death sentence unless we found a match. A bone marrow transplant was her only hope. Without a second thought, the entire family lined up to be tested. My parents, my brother, and me, Lily. We were a close-knit unit, a fortress of love built around our matriarch. We waited, our collective breath held, praying for a miracle. The miracle never came. Instead, a bombshell dropped, shattering our world into a million unrecognizable pieces. The results were in, and they were impossible. Everyone matched, except Farmer, Ivan and Arden close. The doctors ran the tests again, and then a third time. The conclusion was undeniable. A cold. Hard fact that defied everything I knew to be true. I was not biologically related to the people I called my family. Confusion turned to disbelief, then to a sickening dread. A hospital mix-up at birth. That was the only explanation. 25 years of my life, my entire identity, was a lie. The reflection in the mirror was suddenly a stranger's. Who was I, if not their daughter, their sister, their granddaughter? The search for grandma and donor was now a frantic search for their real child. The family I had always known began to unravel. My parents, their faces etched with a grief I couldn't comprehend, were torn between the daughter they had raised and the daughter they had lost. They found her. Of course, her name was Vivian. While I had grown up, surrounded by warmth and privilege, Vivian's life had been a series of hardships. She was raised in poverty, bouncing between foster homes, her spirit hardened by a world that had shown her no kindness. When my parents brought her home, it was like introducing a storm into a quiet house. Vivian looked at me with eyes full of a resentment, so deep it was terrifying. She saw our family photos, my childhood bedroom, the life that should have been hers, and she hated me for it. She was brilliant in a cruel, calculating way. She never accused me outright. Instead, it was a whisper here, a subtle manipulation there. She'd tell my mother how she always dreamed of learning piano, just as I was about to practice. She'd casually mentioned to my father how she wished she'd had a dad to teach her how to ride a bike, knowing he'd taught me. Slowly, skillfully, she painted me as a usurper, a deceitful cuckoo in their nest. The family, desperate to connect with their long-lost daughter and assuaged by guilt, started to believe her. I saw the shift in their eyes. The warmth was replaced by suspicion, the love by a hesitant distance. I was becoming an outsider, in my own home, the ghost of a life that was no longer mine. The family dinners became silent, suffocating affairs. Every laugh Vivian shared with them was a knife in my heart. Grandma Ann, weak as she was the only one who still looked at me with pure, unconditional love. You are my granddaughter, she would whisper, her hand frail in mine. Blood doesn't change that. But her voice was getting weaker, and so was my hope. I couldn't live like this, a phantom in the wreckage of my own family. The questions burned within me. How could a hospital make such a catastrophic mistake? It felt too convenient, too clean. Driven by a desperation to understand, I started my own investigation. I spent weeks digging through old hospital records, chasing down names from 2.5 decades ago. Most were dead ends. People had moved, records were lost. But I was relentless. The truth was the only thing I had left to fight for. Finally, I found a name, Eleanor, a retired nurse who had worked in the maternity ward the year I was born. My heart pounded as I drove to her small, tidy house in a quiet suburb. She was an old woman now, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes holding a deep, ancient sadness. At first, she denied everything. She remembered nothing, she said. But I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. I pushed, showing her the documents, the birth certificates, the undeniable proof that 2 babies had been swapped. I told her about Grandma Ann, about Vivian, about the family that was tearing itself apart, and then she broke. The story spilled out, a torrent of guilt and regret held back for 25 years. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Eleanor was Vivian's mother. She was a young, single nurse with no money and no future. She saw my parents, wealthy and loving, and in a moment of sheer desperation, she made a choice. She switched the name tags on our bassinets. She gave her own child the life she could never provide. And she took me to raise as her own, before abandoning me to the foster care system when the burden became too much. The world tilted on its axis. Vivian wasn't just the girl who took my place. She was the architect of my stolen life's daughter. And the woman who orchestrated it all was sitting right in front of me, weeping for a past she couldn't undo. Armed with Eleanor's confession, I returned home. The confrontation was explosive. I gathered my parents and Vivian in the living room, the same room where we used to celebrate birthdays and open Christmas presents. I laid out the truth, piece by painful piece. Eleanor's confession, the documents, the deliberate, calculated act that had shaped all of our lives. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked at Vivian, not with the adoration of recent weeks, but with a dawning horror. And Vivian, her face was a mask of shock, disbelief, and a pain that mirrored my own. The resentment she held for me, the narrative she had built of a stolen life, crumbled. She wasn't the rightful heir cheated by fate. She was a pawn in her own mother's desperate game. We weren't rivals. We were both victims. In that moment of raw, shared agony, something shifted between us. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, and saw not an enemy, but a girl who had been just as lost as I was. Her anger had been a shield against a lifetime of hurt. We had been set against each other by a lie, but the truth, as devastating as it was, had set us free. The path forward was uncertain. My family, our family, was broken and would need a long time to heal. But as Vivian and I stood there, amidst the ruins of our past, a strange and unexpected bond began to form. We were two sides of the same tragic coin, forever linked by a cruel twist of fate. We decided then and there to face the future, not as enemies, but together, as sisters forged in the fires of a shared trauma. It wasn't the family I was born into, or the one I thought I had, but maybe, just maybe, it was the one we were meant to build for ourselves. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more content.